I'm going to talk a little bit about this, the significance of some of these shlokas that we have been doing this morning and yesterday, because some of you may end up you may think that many of these are sort of cultural etiquette, ethic, and or even maybe some form of asceticism, like discipline. While this is of course true to a certain extent, in this context of the Bodhicharyavatara, there's something that you have to notice. Remember, okay, so I'm going to discuss this a little bit before we get too sleepy. And then once we get a little dull and drowsy, we will switch to, question, probably argument. This is actually required, some sort of a debate, if it is possible, because that's how we have to learn. Remember, we were talking about the truth, and Buddhist conclusion of the truth being non-duality. Okay, for instance, in the Heart Sutra, the non-duality is taught in 4 verses. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than the emptiness, emptiness is not other than the form. But how do you apply that in day-to-day basis? You know, if someone pinch your girlfriend's bottom, do you just recite, like form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and so on and so forth? Will that take care of your, emotion? So how do you apply that view? How do you utilize that view? That is always the question here, isn't it? So in preparation to the next chapters, let me discuss a little bit about Vipassana and Shamatha. I'm sure many of you know Vipassana, Goenka's Vipassana and all of that. I was just checking with my Sanskrit expert here what is the meaning of Vipassana, and I've confirmed Tibetan word hlaktong. Hlaktong, tong is seeing, hla is something like an extra or totality or without missing anything. Rajit put it this way, which is very good. So Vipassana is a technique to see things in its totality, nothing missing. When we look generally from based on our habitual pattern, when we look at things, we miss a lot. We either miss or misinterpret, or we have partial understanding or partial perception or diluted perception, diluted perception. We have perception perceived through already contaminated by all kinds of prejudice, all kinds of, religious prejudice, cultural prejudice, and just your own habitual prejudice. So we don't see things in its totality or in its sort of direct how it is or what it is. So this is why Vipassana is a technique to see that. Now, where does the Shamatha come in? Actually, the Shamatha and Vipassana, to the certain extent, they're kind of 2 different things. At the same time, they're very, especially for us, habituated beings like us, both Shamatha and Vipassana end up being necessary. Even though, if you look at the technique as it is, Shamatha and Vipassana are kind of almost like a contradictory. But this is how it is with a lot of the Buddhist method. Buddhist methods are designed to erode each other. I don't know how to put this. Buddhist methods are, a lot of times Buddhist methods are designed to cancel each other, so to speak. Because you remember, we don't want, as a path dweller, we have to follow the path. But the path is not the means. You have to abandon the path once you reach to the other shore, wherever you want to be. So, dharma, the path, the method, in fact, if for a quite a matured practitioner, your path is going to be, if you are not a matured, if you are a beginner, then of course we will say path. You have to have the path. Path is the only savior. You have to really follow the path. Path will lead you to the right direction, so on and so forth. But once you become matured, after a while, the master will then tell you, path is your obstacle. You have to get rid of the path. And this is always going to be the biggest challenge, because by then you have already fallen in love with the path, because it is so, blissful, and it is so convincing, and it is so logical, and it makes sense. Yes, that's it. Especially when you reach to the tantric path, like the path such as Mahamudra or Mahasandhi, they hate anything that makes sense. Anything that makes sense is very, very dangerous, because anything that makes sense has some sort of a sophistication to trap you, because it makes sense. So you, of course, naturally likes it because it makes sense. But anyway, let's not get too distracted with this. Let's go back to the, I was saying how Shamatha and Vipassana, as a technique, they are kind of a separate thing. But this is important. The reason why they are separate is, one, Shamatha is purely a technique for you to, technique to make your mind malleable, make your mind workable, make your mind, you can, once you are good at Shamatha, then you can basically order around your mind. At the moment, you can't. When the mind thinks something, that's it. You just have to follow that. Right now, mind is controlling you. You are mind's slave. But the Shamatha technique, which is very simple, by the way, very, very simple. Don't think that the Shamatha, as I explained this, Shamatha, because Shamatha sounds like a technique to control your mind, you may think there has to be a very sophisticated steps, but it is actually not. It is as simple as looking at an object and simply trying to bring the thoughts again and again and again into this object. And then, as I said this morning, or also yesterday, every time you realize you are distracted, you going back to designated object. That's how you train your mind. Basically, it's simple. Of course, there's a variations, and different meditation instructors will, of course, also instruct you in a different manner. But, Shamatha will make your mind malleable. But Shamatha will not liberate you. This is important to make note. Shamatha is not designed to liberate you. Now, this is an important for Buddhist philosophy students to make note, because even though Shamatha is not really made or designed to liberate you, Saraha, who some say is from Maharashtra, so we are probably very close to wherever he was dwelling. Saraha said that like a muddy water, if you want to see the clear water, you do not stir the water, you let it be. And when you let the water be, then all the mud will settle. And then you see the pristine, clear water. This is what shamatha is. But we know the mud is beneath. Any day, any time, somebody could stir the mud and the water can become muddy instantly. So eventually, applying the vipassana, which we have to get rid of the mud. Okay, so even though shamatha is not, as I was saying, shamatha is not designed to liberate you, the fact that shamatha actually calms you down, shamatha gives opportunity to your mind to be at its normal state. Let's put it this way. Because of the technique, shamatha actually, when you apply the shamatha, it really makes your mind function at using its own undiluted, uncorrupted state. So many times the effect of the shamatha is almost identical to the effect of the vipassana. So what I'm saying is that a perfect shamatha practitioner could be seen as someone who has no jealousy, no anger, no pride, so on and so forth. So this could happen. But this kind of person, so in meditation, in the scriptures, we are warned again and again and again not to fall for this kind of experience, because it's a very dangerous, because mud is settling. So you think there's no more mud, and then you may begin to act as the siddhas, and you may even deceive yourself thinking that you have reached some sort of attainment, but you have not. You are basically an ordinary person, but who has achieved certain control of your mind. But anyway, the training of the shamatha it gives you control over your mind. Using this control over your mind, we then practice the vipassana. The vipassana, as I was saying, is purely to really see the truth. Shamatha is not. Shamatha is to gain control. Vipassana is to see the truth. Truth in its totality, not just partially, right? So, vipassana is infinite. In fact, what we have been doing like yesterday and this morning can be considered as a vipassana. Strictly speaking, we are discussing shunyata. We are pondering, contemplating, discussing, having a dialogue, questioning, answering regarding the truth of the phenomena. So this could be contemplative vipassana too. Also, if you read words and the literature of that concerns the truth, the non-duality, this could be also considered as the vipassana. The vipassana, okay, the identity of the vipassana is quite big. But, okay, so generosity, the act of generosity, act of discipline, all this can be also considered as a vipassana to the certain extent. This is what the Mahayana people would say. But normally, whenever we talk about vipassana and shamatha, it always refers to something to do with the meditation, the fifth paramita, dhyan, meditation, concentration, normally. So in this case, we then have one, there are many different techniques. One very popular technique is what we call form mindfulness. Form mindfulness is basically the mindfulness, being mindful of the body, being mindful of the form, being mindful of the form or the body. Being mindful of feeling, mindful of mind, and then being mindful of dharma, references. This is quite a big subject. It's basically, let me come from this angle, from more personal angle. Whenever we say us, me, whenever we are talking, interacting, perceiving, tasting, hearing, there's always the phenomena of me. And this me is almost always referred to form, feeling, mind, and reference. If not all, at least 3 or 2. So form, feeling, mind, and the reference. These are 4 very, very important sort of attribute that acts as what we call me. For instance, like whenever when we think about ourselves, me, or someone else, also my mother, father, the first thing probably that comes in your mind is a form, your form. So the structure of the body, the color, the shape, the weight, or whatever, just that tangible form. Then more subtle is the feeling. Not only the physical feeling, but sadness. That's a big part of us. Happiness, depression, anger, feeling basically. And then the mind, the knower, the cognizant. And then lastly, dharma, which the word is the dharma, but in this case is referring to references, meaning I'm an Indian, I'm a man, woman, I'm father, mother, I am something. This is what makes me. Okay? So, extensive, step-by-step vipassana training begins with dealing with a form. Now, of course, the most general way to contemplate on the form is sitting, and then just, I'm sure many of you have been to the Goenka Vipassana courses, so you just sit. Okay, so you sit hours and hours and hours. Really, you have to know, it's not as there's some sort of a blessing on cushion. When the cushion and your butt meet, there's some sort of a strange blessing gets formed, and then it gives you the blessing. It gives you the enlightenment. It's got nothing to do with that. Really, you can easily do the same thing standing, walking, dancing. But we are among, standing, dancing, lying down, whatever. Among these form, the thing that probably will confine us more practically is sitting. This is why asana, all this asana is among many asanas, the sitting is preferred. That's the only reason. It's not like a sitting is some sort of a holy posture, more holier than standing or walking. It's just that it might, and it does, actually, it does. So, okay, you are not allowed to, lean on, you are not allowed to scratch, you are not allowed to, sort of walk, you have to sit. So, of course, if you sit just a minute or two, it might not give you the impact because your mind get distracted and all of that. If you are very thorough and step-by-step guided Vipassana meditation could begin with Master telling you to sit for years, every day, hours and hours of nothing to think of, no love, no compassion, no light going out, no light coming in, no visualization, no seed syllables, no om, no hung, no bam, nothing. Just sit. And this is so profound. For instance, like in Zen tradition, they even have a word for this. In Japanese, they call it shikantaza, which means just sit. Just sitting immediately takes you to the form. That's just one single method among other billions of methods. And what are the other billions of methods, if you want to hear? Wash this way. Don't wash this way. Point like this. Rest. If you're walking, rest the opposite direction. Don't open your mouth too much when you stuff food inside your mouth. I don't know, stuff like that. Don't chew hard. Don't chew loudly. So on and so forth. This is part of the form Vipassana. I need to put this in your head because really this is really different from creating some sort of a Buddhist culture here. As you know, there is that, because especially in the monastic situation, there is that. But this kind of discipline you have to remember this. Every single Buddhist method, be it offering of incense, lamp, circumambulation, prostration, meditation, cutting your limbs and feeding it to a hungry tiger, all of that must complement to the absolute view. If it does not, then your method is an extreme view. If your sitting is not complementing the shunyata, you are a fundamentalist sitter, basically. You are basically an extremist. You are an extremist, and this is not right. Path is not doing its job. So it is not just creating some sort of a code of conduct. So this is what I wanted to put first. So now, if you want to, I'm sure by now things are getting a little drowsy. So if you want to ask questions. If not, then we will go through more of these small, discipline. And before that, actually, I'd like to also talk about other methods that has to do with accumulation of merit. Okay. Any question? Yeah?
Rinpoche,
Yeah.
I have several questions around one specific notion of devotion. I'm just wondering whether devotion is a kind of emotion. If yes, can emotion go beyond emotions? And the second question is, if yes, how can we take devotions as the path to destroy our ego?
Okay.
Thank you.
I will tell you within this context, okay? Not
Sure.
like,
Okay, sure.
But it will help, I think. Within the Mahayana context, within the Madhyamika context, I'm going to explain the devotion. We talk about what makes you not a Buddhist, for instance. Impermanence, all compounded things are impermanent. All emotions are pain. Everything has no truly exist in nature. Nirvana is beyond extreme. So this is like, to be Buddhist, you have to be accepting this. Likewise, I could explain what makes you not a Mahayanist. You understand? What will make you not a Mahayana? In this, we talk about 3 doors of liberation. The ground to which we are working has to be emptiness. Path that we apply has to be characteristic-less. Shunyata again. The result that we are aiming, enlightenment, has to be beyond aspiration. These 3 are so important for Mahayana. I'm telling you this because in a way, devotion is a longing, isn't it? Longing. And in the Mahayana context, it is actually a longing. It's a mind training, and it is a longing, but we also know it's a longing for something unlongable. Does it make sense? It's longing for unlongable. Now, why would you do that? You understand? Why would you want to long for something unlongable? The answer is, well, because you already long other things. And those other things that you are longing and pursuing only gives you trouble. So you should long for this, which is unlongable. Shunyata. Okay? So now in this, after hearing this, you will know sort of the more quintessential meaning of devotion in the Mahayana. Yes, initially it is an emotion. Has to be. All path is an emotion. All path. Meditation is an emotion. Trying to concentrate is an emotion. Doubt is an emotion. Conviction is an emotion. Or confidence is an emotion. All of this is a subjective and objective. Love, kindness. And until our path is not completely merged with the wisdom, it's all emotion. But once your path, the devotion, is accompanied completely by the wisdom, then the means have become the end. Journey has become the goal. There is no more emotion in this case. So, just to put it simply, it's yes, devotion is an emotion, but it's a necessary emotion. All the thinking that there is an enlightenment. Okay. Yes.
Oh, My question actually was similar, and it's something I asked SB before. I was thinking, I wanted to know the difference between emptiness and unborn, especially in relation to Guru Yoga. And if everything is unborn, what is exactly that thing that happened that when Milarepa heard the name of Marpa that led him to go to Marpa, and what is for us to believe in?
Yes. Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not going to talk about Guru Yoga too much because it's a tantric stuff that those tantric people talk a lot. But anyway, that is a purely karmic consequences. That is purely a karmic consequences or karmic connection or karmic manifestation. This is why it didn't work out with the first teacher. But when the first teacher mentioned the Marpa, even very sound of the Marpa made him really want to see this guy. This is totally a karmic manifestation. And karma plays an important, very, very important role. Very important. And I have already explained to you yesterday about what karma is. Karma is another emotion, remember? Okay.
Yeah. Rinpoche ji, I would like to ask a couple of questions. The first regarding the Bodhisattvahood and the Buddhahood. You explained yesterday that the Bodhisattva does not aspire for the Buddhahood and prefers to be born again and again to remove the sufferings of sentient beings.
Yes.
My question is, why is it that? Why doesn't he become a Buddha and continues to remove the sufferings of the sentient beings, like Siddhartha Gautama? After having got enlightened, he continued to help people.
This is actually a path language. It's a method. It is a manner of. It's a method to train yourself. There is actually a Bodhisattva path. It's called, what is it called? There's many different varieties. You know, there's like a shepherd like a Bodhisattva, king like a Bodhisattva, boatman like a Bodhisattva. So there are variations like that. But as a training, see, the Bodhisattva really wants to not to have this cherishing the self, no matter what. Even the wishing to get enlightenment, the Bodhisattva is very cautious of. So if such a Bodhisattva wants to really train this kind of in this way, then right from the beginning, you aspire, you learn to aspire. I mean, even us who are totally selfish, we cling to ourselves, we cherish ourselves, probably just that's all we do. But once we follow the Mahayana path, we at least recite prayers that has, like verses like may I never be enlightened, or my aspiration is as vast as sky, so on and so forth. This is a mind training. Okay?
Yeah. My second question, if you allow me to ask about reincarnation, which is very much, which exists in Tibetan tradition, but we have not heard of reincarnations in other Buddhist traditions. Why is it like that?
Okay. It's actually not really true that reincarnation does not exist in the other tradition. You know why Tibetans got credited, if you like? I don't know. Should we use accused? I would like to use the word credited, because reincarnation is a very, very important subject. I mean, it's a very important attribute. It's a very important point. First of all, reincarnation, probably in the English word reincarnation is not doing the justice. What is reincarnation in Hindi? Pune? What is it? Can you give Raji a... I'd like to get the bottom of this. Please say it in Sanskrit. What is in Sanskrit the word for reincarnation?
Normally the word that gets used is punarjanma, but it is not reincarnation because it's rebirth, it literally translated. But since we do not have if you were to look at the word, it would be avataran, that is to come back again, descend again. So if that is these are the two words that normally are being used.
Okay.
Punarjanma.
Janam.
Janma, yeah.
What is janam?
Is to come into being. The root is ja, which means to come into being.
Coming to being. I think,
having taken birth.
See, the coming to being is more accurate. I would say coming to being, coming to birth. Birth is more misleading. Coming to being is much more. It's something that we can. The Tibetan word is a yang si. Yang means again. Si is existence, being. In this case.
Well, Rinpoche ji, it's a...
Being born. That also, yes. Yeah?
I mean, we need not discuss the exact translation of the rebirth or reincarnation.
Right.
Because it can continue, the debate can continue like that. I just wanted to...
Are you talking about the reincarnated Tulkus?
Yes.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
I see.
That's why I use the word reincarnation deliberately, because it's not used in the general sense of rebirth. And secondly, sorry to correct Professor, but it is the root jana and not ja. It's punarjana. Jana means to be born.
To be born.
To come into existence.
Okay.
But, yeah. So I'm talking about this Tulku. Yeah. Tulku tradition.
Yes. Okay. You want to know why there is a recognized Tulkus, right? That's what you want to know. Because not recognized, not unthroned, Tulkus does exist in other what do you call it? Other tradition. In the whole Jataka Mala Sutra, when Buddha said, when I was a rabbit, therefore he is reincarnated. He once upon a time he was a rabbit, and he is reincarnated now as the Prince Siddhartha. So, but it is not labeled as a reincarnation of a rabbit. Of course, we will not say that, right? Reincarnated Tulku that is found with the Tibetan tradition, which I have to say is the purpose is totally outdated. It is not working anymore. It has served its purpose in the past. And it is based on the philosophy of reincarnation. It happens like this. I'm going to put an analogy here. It happens this way. Let's say you become a very, very significant to your disciple. You have done so much, and we are talking so much. We are not talking about benefiting few hundreds. we are talking about benefiting thousands and probably like hundreds and hundreds of thousands. And we are not only talking about benefiting them spiritually only. We are talking about benefiting in their social life, their just everything, culture, their very existence. You understand? So this is, okay, say this is the situation. So what happens is you die. Okay? After you die, there is big, there's a big legacy that you have left behind. There's an institution, there's a universities, there's a villages, there's actually like, I don't know, big undertakings, hospitals, monasteries. Okay, so that's something that you have to think. And then, as always, as Buddhism travels to different parts of the world, your cultural habit also gets influences the Buddhist thinking. And it's not entirely contradictory to Buddhist philosophy of reincarnation. So the Tibetan know that there is something called reincarnation. Then it also gets mixed up with praying to the Buddha to manifest out of compassion, to continue benefiting ourselves, right? So it's really it has so many different aspects here. Let's say I'm a follower of Avalokiteshvara because I like the concept of compassion. I like the notion of compassion. I like the sound of compassion. I like the activity of compassion. Therefore, I'm attracted to Bodhisattva of compassion, who happened to be Avalokiteshvara. Then I dream I practice Avalokiteshvara. I recite his names. I think about Avalokiteshvara as I fall asleep. The first thing that I think of when I wake up is Avalokiteshvara. So on and so forth. You get trained, you train your mind like that. And then if I'm good at this, even a dead leaf falling from the tree, I will consider this as a Avalokiteshvara's manifestation, thinking that this is Avalokiteshvara telling me life is impermanent. Even a breeze, cool breeze, I will consider this as a blessing of the Avalokiteshvara, telling me that I am alive, but my life is impermanent, so on and so forth. You understand? And then I have master who actually speaks, who actually teaches me, who guides me, who gives me guidance, spiritual, temporal, everything, who is like my father, who is like my sister, brother, wife, husband, everything. And he or she is my guide. And because I love Avalokiteshvara, then I also think that he or she is Avalokiteshvara's manifestation. He or she dies, I continue, pray for his presence. Now the reincarnation, the existing philosophy of reincarnation, that comes in, and you think, okay, my master, the human master, has died, so he must reincarnate for me. You see, things get diluted. For me, he cannot give up me. He will remember me. And many times it also happens that some of these young tulkus, when they were very young, they do recognize you. They do talk to you. They do actually remember things, so on and so forth. This has happened, and many times it served the purpose because this young tulku actually take over the job of the previous incarnation. And it has served this kind of purpose for a long time in Tibet. But then what happens? As usual, many of these masters, they become very powerful. They may not necessarily be chasing after the power and fame, but the power and the fame may come to their doorsteps. They become powerful. They become royal priest of Mongols and China and whatever. And then this master dies, and then many family who are newly wed, who is and pregnant, powerful pregnant ladies, the kin of the previous incarnation, powerful warlords whose wife happens to be pregnant, maybe after about a month or two after the dead master died, then they begin to move their mind. Because there is a big trump card here. It's like a lottery. So this kind of things gets corrupted. In this way, it gets corrupted. You understand? So it is not baseless. It has a base on reincarnation, the philosophy of reincarnation. But someone has, many have, there, even in Tibet, there is a tradition such as, for instance, like a certain lineage, their gurus are not necessarily a reincarnation of some previous lama. Their head or the important religious head are usually by merit, through their training, through their achievement. Not always they are better than tulkus, who are basically found in the in the completely unlikely place. So, but the system, and like all the system, it gets corrupted very much, and this has a much more chance to be corrupted, so to speak. And now there is, now there are more ratio of tulku has gone up. You understand? If you look at if you are thinking about 1930s and 1920s, there's hardly, maybe very few tulkus, very little. Karmapa happened to be one of the earliest one. Otherwise, very few tulkus. Now, even the pet dog of a High Lamas might get reincarnated and get enthroned. This is not a good situation, but this is the reality.
Thank you very much, Rinpoche-ji. But my question is not about the explanation of reincarnation, but why it is unique to Tibetan tradition and not to other traditions. We have not heard of reincarnation and rediscovering reincarnation or tulkus in other Buddhist traditions, like in Theravada or China or Japan.
I see. Yeah. Okay. I think like Theravada, this may have something to do with the Vajrayana.
We have Vajrayana tradition in Tibet, China, Japan, and other countries also.
But the Japanese Vajrayana is like a Yoga Tantra, isn't it? It's not really the Anu Yoga Tantra, where the teaching such as the Guru Yoga is not really taught as intensive as in the Anu Yoga Tantra.
Yeah.
When you reach to the Anu Yoga Tantra, Guru is everything. Guru is above the Buddha. Guru is the embodiment of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Guru is everything. So this kind of practice also gives birth to such situations where you actually have reincarnated tulkus leading your life. Theravada is easy. Theravada is never led by one person. Sangha is the most important in the Theravada situation, which is much more clearer. Whereas Vajrayana, especially Anu Yoga Tantra practitioners, Guru is the most important. and especially the gurus that ended up becoming high-ranking guru, then it gives birth to a lot of problems, I guess. I mean, Telopa was a guru for Naropa, but he was not a high-ranking at all. He was some sort of a fisherman, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yes.
Things like that. Virupa is a guru of Dombi Heruka. Gayadhara and all of that. Virupa is just a drunkard man, who got disrobed and who got expelled almost by Nalanda University, so on and so forth. But a moment when the guru is institutionalized, when we have the legacy, big legacy, this is an unavoidable sort of situation. This happens a lot. It does have its own benefit, but it also is open to a lot of corruption, I think. So why does reincarnated Tulku exist only in Tibetan tradition, Tibetan Buddhist tradition, not in other traditions such as Theravada? I think it has something to do with Vajrayana. Because like the Theravadan monasteries are headed by sangha, isn't it? Mostly.
Yeah.
It's not really headed by a specific guru, one person. This may have a lot to do with this phenomena of emergence of reincarnate. And then, of course, also politics.
Yeah.
Tibet is, and I will openly say here, the downfall of Tibetan Buddhism is ever since the Tibetan Lamas began to
Rule.
get interested into politics during the, Mongols' time. This is the beginning of the downfall of Tibetan Buddhism. And I really hope that such kind of problems will not occur in Burma and Sri Lanka, because as soon as the monks and the high monks, when they begin to become, they get involved in politics, then this kind of power struggle begins to happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Rinpoche.
Okay, wait. Sorry. Yes.
Rinpoche, if you allow, I will ask you a question. This question, again, has some... yesterday, I already asked you a question and you answered, but then it gave rise to some more questions. And so I'm just putting it in front of you, because, especially because we are in Maharashtra. See, I asked you yesterday about this question of acceptance of or belief in rebirth. As you yesterday said that, in fact, in terms of absolute reality, there is no birth or no rebirth and no reincarnation. And it only it works at the level of, you say, relevant truth. Now, my question is that, for example, this idea of rebirth, and even now, just now when you gave this answer that about reincarnation, that once it was useful. So similarly, if I ask you this, that see, for example, in case of the Buddhists in Maharashtra, so, for example, now I don't know about the English and Americans why they deny rebirth, but here I can see a clear reason. And that this idea of rebirth, which was also there in Hinduism and related with the karma, in fact, instead of doing good to the community, did more harm in terms of the exploitation of the lower caste, because it in a way legitimized the exploitation from the point of upper class people, and at the same time it demoralized the lower caste people, because they started thinking that, okay, it is just because of their karma that they got rebirth in the lower caste. So it in fact worked like a double-edged sword, and empowered the exploiters and demoralized the exploited. Now, if this idea is not helping a community to do better, and if they reject it, then isn't it, since it's anyway it's a relative at a relative level, it has its utility in rejecting it, because by rejecting that, now you see we see that the community, Loka's community, Buddhist community who embrace Buddhism gain confidence, right? And they feel that no, it's not their karma which sort of made them suffer, but it is because of the oppression of a high class for which they are suffering. And they sort of gave them the confidence, their moral became high, and even they started challenging this kind of ideology, right? So I see there's certainly a positive aspect of it. And as I said, if you also think in terms of the Mahayana ideals, yes, since it's a relative truth in a way, so anyway, it's as illusory as the rebirth. I mean, the idea of rejecting rebirth or accepting rebirth is more of the illusory level. From the Theravada point of view, as I said yesterday, that Buddha says that my dharma has an assurance for both, I mean, all sorts of people, those who believe in rebirth and even those who don't really believe in rebirth. So there's assurance for all of them. And if they just start practicing. And like yesterday we had this question, like rebirth provides a reason to act morally, to act ethically. Now, I think that, see, for now personally, for example, a person like me, now I seek the wisdom from Buddha's teachings. For example, in Majjhima Nikaya, I say I haven't really experienced a past life, or I don't even have a experience of a future, whatever the future of people. So I said, okay, for me, this is still not a reality. I mean, this is still what people say, what scriptures say. So whenever I realize it, I experience it, I will believe it. But so I'm a person like I don't even deny it fully, and I don't even accept it fully. So, but still, for me, in hearts of my hearts, I'm a hardcore Buddhist, and I say that this belief in rebirth or not belief in rebirth does not really stop me from practicing. So for meditating, no problem. For practicing the moral code of conduct, Eightfold Path, no problem. And see, because I see there are other principles in Buddhism. For example, the principle of empathy, or what we call as atmopamyata, that means equating yourself with others. So as the Buddha said in Dhammapada, that as I am, so are the others, and as the others are, so am I. So if I'm hurt, then if I feel the pain, so I should not also hurt others. So this kind of ideals which are there, and which are, I think, sufficient for me to drive my actions as moral or ethical actions. So don't you think that, I mean, there should be a scope even to the non-belief in rebirth? And I think, do we really have is it really necessary to differentiate whether like real Buddhists and Buddhists who are not real Buddhists if they don't really believe in rebirth? So thank you. That's my question.
I think there's a lot of elements in all your questions. So I already forgot the first one.
No, in fact, there's one. There's only one thing. So my whole thing is that is it really if the idea is just about the utility, and as I said, if rejecting rebirth, is it also has its utility? So
I think yes.
And if it is all ultimately, so that if it is all at the level of relevant truth, then
I have been discussing. Yeah. I have discussed about how the Maharashtrian Buddhists interpret karma and reincarnation. I still haven't really, I'm still not clear. I do have a vague feeling that the understanding of the karma and rebirth somehow is sort of misplaced. I don't know how the Hindus explain karma and rebirth. Because for me, the very fact that these Buddhists can claim that they don't have to go through the consequences such as the lower birth and all of this, and segregate, and choose what they want to choose, that in itself is a karma, that in itself can cause and higher birth, or higher in this I'm not talking about caste higher, like I'm talking about like what the Buddhists talk about, the birth, like a heavenly birth, or the birth basically not a lower realm. You understand? I think the way I hear, the way you talk about the understanding of the reincarnation in some of these Maharashtrian Buddhists, is that if you believe in reincarnation, then you could be thinking that you are born as a lower caste. That's because of your past karma, right? Isn't?
Yeah.
Yes, and you are stuck with it. You are stuck with this. Now this is okay. I want to actually ask you.
Yes.
What do you mean by stuck with it? This is the part that I'm not getting.
No, what I was saying is that see, this then became kind of an accepted belief, and as I said, in terms
Accepted
of
as what? That unchangeable?
Accepted belief means my present state or my present birth in the lower caste maybe is a result of my past bad karma. So this is in terms of, like as I said earlier, that's what people used to think. So I'm bound to serve the higher class, and I'm bound to sort of suffer whatever sufferings are there on account of that. And as I said, for the higher class, it sort of justified.
This is where the Buddhist explanation of the karma and the reincarnation differs. I don't think we talk like that. Is that how they interpret here?
Yeah, and this is also the way it was interpreted even in the Hindu community, when we say, okay, as I said, it provides a legitimacy for a higher class to oppress the lower class, because they say now we don't have to really be compassionate towards them, because what they're suffering is because of their past bad karma.
Right. So that's a totally different explanation on the karmic and the way karma functions from Buddhism. If that is the case, I don't know whether that is how Hindu scripture explains, but if that is the case, it is totally different.
So how would you think the way out of it is?
Let's say I'm a higher caste, and let's say I'm looking at a lower caste. If I mistreat them, thinking that they are lower caste, and my mistreatment is not my mistreatment to this lower caste is justified. If I do think that, it is a negative action. It is a negative thought. Because it is, remember I was talking about Surijin Maimbe Yilajeba, which means it is a deceptive thought. It is not close to the truth. Because my negative actions and my negative thought has got nothing to do with the object. In fact, I could get bad karma by getting angry with this tree. This tree is not even a human being. This is not even a being. I could get my world. This is what Buddha said. You can wipe away your defilement with your own practice. I cannot do that for you. So, similarly, let's say I'm a higher caste and I'm looking at a lower caste, and I treat this lower caste respectfully, humbly, and treat them equally to me, I will gain so much merit. This is how I would be understanding the karma. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think this, I don't know what Hindu scripture says, but this is how the Buddhists would explain the karma. So if you do that, then the karmic action and the karmic consequences is entirely upon your hand. It's all entirely in your hand. You decide. So this is why even in the, we say, like, let's talk about generosity, for instance. I can give a beggar in the street, thinking that this beggar, let me give him a coin so that he will shut up and he will leave. That's one attitude, and I give him a coin. And then I can think, oh, poor beggar, I should give him because he needs to eat. That's one attitude. And then I can think, oh, another fellow human being, much more respect here. With that, you give the coin. Then another level is, he could be a bodhisattva manifesting here at my doorstep, trying to help me, invoking my generosity. Let me offer him a coin. And then if you reach to the tantric level, wow, my guru is manifesting here. My deva is manifesting here. Then I give him a coin. Each of this will have a different consequences. Each of this will have a different power and different manifestation of karmic consequences. So, based on that, but that's just one element of your question, isn't it? That's just one element of your question.
Yeah.
Does that clarify something?
Yes, I got understand what you want to say.
Yeah.
Other thing, as a path, is it? Would you ever think as a path? If it is sort of if this non-belief in rebirth, if it is
Yes.
has a utilitarian value, if it's helping, would you approve that? Would you say that it's okay in the path?
Yeah, non-believing. We were talking totally on the view. I don't know what do you mean by not believing, because sometimes when you say.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody says that,
because like you, I am supposedly, by the way, I mean, you are at least, not even recognized as a tulku.
Yes.
Here I am supposedly a reincarnation of some great being. I don't remember a thing about him. You understand? I mean, forget about him, like I don't remember a thing about what happened, what I ate today during the lunch.
Yes.
I don't have any recollections. And I don't have to always believe and have this notion, okay, I have this reincarnation thing within, here, and practice. Of course, I forget that I'm reincarnation. But philosophically, if you don't believe in a reincarnation, you are, what I'm saying is, if your doctrine does not have established view on the relative level, of course, not on the ultimate level. We are not arguing on that.
Yeah.
On the relative level, if you do not have that view, then I know you have said that. What did you say?
I said that is it really necessary for ethical or moral behavior to believe in rebirth?
Not,
because even without that, we can. Yeah,
no, you don't.
Yeah.
But then you are not being Buddhist. Are you trying to become Buddhist just to be ethical and morally sound person? But we are not. This is the point that I'm trying to make. To be a Buddhist is got nothing to do with become the most moral person on earth. We don't care. What do we care? To be Buddhist means to be liberated from the ignorance. And the morality and ethic only is a tool. In fact, not the best tool. It only becomes the best tool when it is accompanied with the wisdom. In fact, morality and the ethic, if it is not accompanied by wisdom, it becomes pain in the neck to yourself and to others. Because I'm vegetarian. Look at these non-vegetarians. You understand what I'm saying? I'm this person who is like, I don't drink, I don't smoke. So you segregate. It becomes a cause of the pride, so on and so forth. Yes, if you are only if your aim is to be a morally sound, ethically sound person, no need to be Buddhist. I mean, you're not necessarily, you have to follow the path of the Buddha Dharma. Path of the Buddha Dharma has to have this element where you are not only concerned, it has to go beyond this life, basically. Because morally sound, ethically sound person sounds like you only care this life. So, and also, then it becomes so complicated, because what is good morality? Because there are so many human species whose morality differs from us. And morality is so, ethic, as I'm sure you know, ethic and morality is just very difficult to define, isn't it? I mean, people laugh at a Tibetan woman in the past having 7 husbands. That's so immoral, And then yet, people sort of assume it's all right for a man to have 4 wives or 5 wives. The morality and ethic becomes very, very subjective.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think we have dwelled enough on this one. We will just gallop through some of the stanzas now and finish the 5th chapter at least. This is a famous quotation. I mean, this is a famous shloka that has been quoted many, many times. There's nothing that a bodhisattva will not learn. Bodhisattva must learn. If given the chance, bodhisattva must learn whatever is necessary so that the bodhisattva can benefit and accumulate merit. Yes, talking about merit. We were talking about the Vipassana and the Shamatha. How Vipassana is important to see the truth, and how Shamatha is important to make the mind malleable or stable. Within this context, we have to also remember, this is very much relevant to what we have been discussing with Professor Devkar at the moment, just now, and many of you. Karma. Karma plays important role. Karma is an action, and I've already explained what is karma. Karma, strictly speaking, is the second emotion that I talked about yesterday. The first, the emotion of ignorance. Second, karma, action. The third, birth. Remember, karma is okay. Mind, our thoughts, we have a thinking, we have a thought. This thought is not accompanied with the wisdom, or this thought we get distracted by this thought. As we get distracted by this this thought becomes gross thoughts. Then gradually the thought becomes emotion. Hope and fear arises. Doubt arises. And out of the hope and fear, all other emotions such as desire, anger. And once this emotion comes, then we begin to act according to these emotions, adopting, abandoning, rejecting, acquiring, so on and so forth. And as we then begin all this myriad of action, this then create consequences, and this is what we call karma. I always quote this, and please remember, this is very important. It is not, and this is an answer to Professor Devka's question also, it is not the ultimate aim for a Buddhist. It is not the ultimate aim to create good karma. You have to make note of this one. As Chandrakirti said, idiots do bad things, bad karma, and go to hell. Idiots do good things and go to heaven. Wise ones go beyond good deed and bad deed and go to liberation. What we want is, we don't want to do both bad and good deed. We want to go out of the cycle of the karma. But right now, we are trapped by the karma. We have no choice. Probably this is what these guys were talking about. You are already a lower caste. You are now finished. Probably this is where the misunderstanding may have happened. But right now, we are byproduct of karma. We are byproduct of the past karma, not necessarily past life, okay? Let's say this morning, let's say last year. We are consequences of the previous cause and condition. Since we are the consequences of the previous cause and condition, we have to somehow unwind this. Unwind this cause and condition. Unwinding the cause and condition is in itself an action, and this is called virtuous actions, virtuous karma. We have to defeat the negative karma. The best way to defeat the negative karma is the wisdom. Remember, wisdom not only defeats the bad karma, it also, defeat is probably not the right word, but it also finishes the good karma. Okay, if you like, defeat both karma. But our immediate attention, because if we don't have a good karma, then we know the consequences of the bad karma is only going to allow us, to engage more into negative actions. So our immediate attention is to collect some good karma so that we at least have a favorable cause and condition, so that we can contemplate on the higher things such as the prajna, samadhi, etc. So for this reason, in the Mahayana and also in the Sharvakayana and the Tantrayana, there are myriad of methods of accumulation of merit. There's so many of them. So this is why we do not reject the act of offerings. We do not reject the act of saving lives. We do not reject the act of penance. We accept any of them as a means to accumulate good karma, so that you get released from the entanglement of the bad karma. So eventually, using this good force, you go or you transcend all the karma. So accumulation, you will find a lot of methods of accumulation of good karma in the Mahayana Shastras, such as here. dedicate all the merit, whatever there is, to sentient beings. And in order to follow the Bodhisattva path, one must try to find a right master or a virtuous friend who is skilled and well versed in the Mahayana teachings, who live up to what he teach. Finding such a master, one should not trade this master even with your life. Follow the instructions of how to follow a virtuous friend or a Mahayana master as it is taught by the Buddha in many different other sutras. Read these sutras. Especially read the sutra of the Akasha Garbha right at the beginning. Also read the collection of the advices by Nagarjuna again and again. Also the collection of the sutras by the Nagarjuna again and again. Again and again, find out what is not prohibited by the Buddha and what is allowed by the Buddha. Also try to find out what will upset the sentient beings, what will inspire them, and accordingly practice this. Again and again, a Bodhisattva must look at the body, the presence of the body and the presence of the mind. Again and again, the Bodhisattva must invoke mindfulness and alertness. A Bodhisattva must apply these methods practically. What is the point of just reading these? There is no benefit by reading physician, the medicine book. If you have ailment, what point is there by reading the medicine book? You must apply the medicine according to your ailment. And so this is the end of the 5th chapter. With the 6th chapter, or do you have questions? Oh, this is not a good sign.
No, this is an easy one, Rinpoche.
Okay.
In 108, verse, the last but one verse, it says to examine again and again the condition of my body and mind. Why not speech also?
It's going to come.
Sorry?
It's going to come.
It's going to come later.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm going to speak very loud in your ears.
And now this is the difficult question, Rinpoche.
Okay.
You said this morning about, it called clarity, and also it's called bliss in the Buddhist text. But today you called it fullness also.
Just trying to, I thought there are some really, really new people, and we don't want to excite them too much with using words, very deceptive words like bliss.
Okay. So they are kind of equivalent terms, is it?
I
Fullness, bliss, and clarity.
Fullness is, I made this up, so don't get too, don't make too much note of that.
And I'm coming to that, you see.
Okay. Well, you like fullness.
Sorry?
You like fullness?
No, because I'm also studying Kashmir Shaivism with Bettina Bauma.
Okay.
That's what the Shaivite, Kashmir Shaivism uses the word fullness. That all is full.
Mm-hmm.
So now we come to the next question, which is the tricky one, for me at least. is that if emptiness and fullness are intertwined,
it's even more than intertwined. Because when we talk about intertwined, it sounds as if there's two.
Yeah, right. Okay. So then, now, from the Buddhist perspective, we say that all is emptiness. And
Yes,
emptiness is form.
Yeah.
Therefore, emptiness is fullness. So if we study fullness, can't we arrive at emptiness also?
Oh, yes, we can. But it's a much more dangerous path.
Well, that's the one that Kashmir Shaivism uses.
Right.
Yeah, well, from what I understand. Maybe Raji can tell you better, perhaps,
Okay.
Yeah. But it's the...
I would say it's much more dangerous. And because I've been taught that way, and I'm quite convinced with that thinking. To teach fullness first and emphasize on that is much more dangerous. Because most of the problem that we have comes out of the notion of thinking something exists.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why the first problem to get rid of is clinging to existence. This is why unborn, emptiness, shunyata is very much emphasized by beings like, Nagarjuna.
So if that is avoided, then by saying all is fullness, you can also arrive at the same thing as all is emptiness, isn't it?
You go to any tantric teachings in the Vajrayana, all they talk about is fullness. Oh my God, so much.
Yeah.
So much of those.
Yeah.
You can't have enough of them.
Because we use that in Vajrayana, I think, as far as I've heard, is that you use fullness as the path, actually.
But there is also in the Mahayana, instead of using the words like full, exotic words like fullness, clarity, bliss, they use word compassion and bodhicitta.
Yes.
It is the real equivalent of that. And it is actually so user-friendly and absolutely safe. Because if you use the compassion, almost nothing you can go wrong. Fullness, bliss, all of this, you may end up in Goa.
That won't be so bad. Our friend is here from Goa, Mr. Sharma, who's the chief secretary.
Okay.
I don't think it's so bad being in Goa. Anyway. So now, another thing is that emptiness and fullness also refer to the two truths, right?
Yes, you can categorize that way.
Clarity would only be in the relative.
Relative, yeah.
Okay, fine. Thanks a lot, Rinpoche.
Okay.
Rinpoche, I wanted to carry on the conversation started by Professor Devkar, slightly from a different point of view. Karma and the issue of social operation. What is it? Is there such a thing as because we look at anger as a defilement, and sometimes anger against oppression is a natural, in a certain sense, reaction, and would that be then considered as bad karma, or any struggle for social justice will have some element of indignation against injustice? So
yes.
how do we reconcile these issues?
Yeah. Okay. Of course, passionately going against to something that is completely injustice against society. All of that is a wonderful thing, admirable to the certain extent, rejoiceable, all of that. But here we are talking about a wisdom, right? We are talking about really high level wisdom. When we talk about this level of the wisdom, we have to really know what do we mean by social justice? What is justice? Who decides? All of that. And when we go through that, it becomes very shaky. So actually, justice, democracy, all the virtuous thing that we have on earth, from the Madhyamika point of view, they are all like a toy. Sure, if this makes people happy, let them have it. But sooner or later, we have to tell them this is not the ultimate. It's only going to deceive you.
Wouldn't it be difficult to even practice dharma if an atmosphere of justice does?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why I was saying earlier, remember? Most immediate thing that we should be concerned is to defeat the non-virtuous.
Yeah.
So let's say you are a social activist. In this context, I would say, yes, go on, do it.
Yeah.
If you are a social activist, I would say, go on, do it. I would support you, I will encourage you, I will rejoice. But extra thing, now that you have, let's say, now you want to enroll, now you want to follow the Śāntideva's path, then the extra information I will give you is, my friend, here you have to realize that this justice that you are looking for is subjective. It is a perception of a certain human being. Let us not get entangled. And I mean, not only a certain human being, at the end of the day, your own decision. It is your own decision. It is your own judgment that this is a good thing. If you ask George Bush, I'm sure he thinks that he's the biggest social activist. If you think that I'm doing such a benefit to these Arabs by imposing democracy, he may think that. And until we are equipped with a non-dualistic absolute wisdom, to a certain extent, we have a lot of this kind of dualistic, yes, moralistic, ethical, and very philanthropic, but nevertheless, still not really beyond the realm of ignorance. We are talking about a very high truth here, higher truth. This is what I was talking earlier. Remember, I was quoting Chandrakirti. Idiot does bad things and go to hell. Idiot does good things and go to heaven. Wise ones must transcend both bad and good and go to liberation. This quotation is important in the Madhyamika.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, what would stop a fully enlightened being who has actualized non-duality falling back to duality? As
What
in,
will-
you say...
What will it take?
What will stop that enlightened being from coming back into duality, into going back into the nightmare?
Oh, uprooting the clinging to the self. That is usually the virus. Clinging to the self and thinking there is a self. Actually, more than clinging to the self. I mean, more than cherishing the self, believing to the existence of the self. That will make a practitioner fall back to the dualistic realm.
So then there is no self to have a nightmare again.
What do you mean? Or what will it? You mean once the enlightened being knows this, not just intellectually, practically, emotionally, if you want. No going back. Root of the samsara is burnt. A seed that is burnt will not give rise to shoots. But the path is still not finished. If you are a Mahayana practitioner, your aim is not just not to go back, remember? Your aim is much higher. Okay?
If I don't give my bodhicitta, still, if I am discouraged by numbers, yawns, space, and all the things you were talking about yesterday, still, even if I'm discouraged, is it going to tame my ego somewhere? Like,
if you are not given up, if you haven't given up the bodhicitta, yes, it will tame it will. The reason why it will is because the very character of the bodhicitta is a very, it's opposite of how ego thinks. It's a much more visionary. Ego is not visionary. Ego has very little vision. It doesn't think, beyond 2 feet. Bodhicitta is big vision. Now, if you want to be a visionary, if you want to be a big leader, if you want to have a big plan, there is no greater, bigger vision than bodhicitta vision. Even from this point of view, bodhicitta should be practiced.
Rinpoche.
Yes.
I have a question that's kind of connected to all 3 or 4 questions being discussed. The way I understand the discussion from the morning, if we are not born and we are not abiding and we don't have cessation, then what is the basis or even the purpose for compassion? Because you said that is a more clearer word than fullness and so on. What is the basis for compassion at all? Why have bodhicitta? Is my question.
This is a classic question. You are very good. This is a classic question. If everything is emptiness, why are we practicing the dharma? That's what you are saying, basically. Because we have not understood the emptiness. We only know intellectually. That's what I was saying. Remember, what would you do? Would you chant, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, if somebody, pinch someone else's butt? Remember? Yeah. It won't. These scholars like Śāntideva and Chandrakirti, they weren't just a scholar who wrote book, who had amazing intellectual discussions, who gave intellectual academic discourses. They were practitioners, not only a practitioners, they were realized being. They realized this truth of emptiness. Some of the account of the evidence of this cannot be, if I tell you, it will just be a story. Why? Because our small mind cannot conceive it. For instance, Chandrakirti, one of the great commentators of Madhyamika, he was appointed as the manager of all the buffaloes of Nalanda University. And once when there was no milk to serve, he milked a painted cow and served that milk to the monks. Okay, fairy tales. For most of us, narrow-minded, dualistically bound mind cannot conceive. And this guy, Śāntideva, he was sitting on the throne as he was teaching the verses that we are at the moment. In the middle section of the 9th chapter, he disappeared from the throne. Without even dismounting from the throne. He disappeared. Simply he disappeared, and there was only the voice people could hear. He was demonstrating that this is not only something that you can talk, read, discuss, but this is something that you can experience. Okay? Now, for you, probably something similar has happened. When you were a little boy, a toy that you played with, you must have thought this is the whole world, haven't you, when you were young? Now, if somebody dismantled this toy, it's not that a big deal. So that much of a Siddha you are, from that childhood to now, but you still have all the other toys. So that's why you are not as equal Siddha to the Śāntideva. You have understood a very, very shallow non-duality regarding the toy. When you are young, that toy is everything, is real. But now you look at this toy with a different eyes. So it's a toy, it's something that you can use, but it's also not a big deal. That's how a practitioner, a Mahasiddha, sees everything. That's how, and that's achievable. This is important because otherwise, philosophy, Buddhist philosophy will be just like any other philosophy that you just discuss, talk about, and get some sort of intellectual satisfaction. Then it is not a path. It's useless. It has to be something that you can practice and put into the practice and benefit yourself. And it is doable. It is really doable. It's not difficult. It is something that you can get accustomed to. It is much less difficult than many of the habits that you have. Right now you are just so used to the old habit that you have. You think they are easy, but you took long time to accumulate those habits. You just have to pay some attention to this habit. It's very much doable. I would say if you can do the Shamatha Vipassana, let's say continuously, let's say an hour a day for next 10 years, you will begin to make less deal out of the things that you used to make such a big deal out of, such as ironing your underwear. Or, I don't know, certain obsessions that you have, you will be free. And that is a small-time enlightenment. That's achievable. Okay, so shall we stop here today? Dedication, please.
सर्वासु दिक्षु यावन्तः कायचित्तव्यथातुराः ते प्राप्नुवन्तु मत्पुण्यैः सुखप्रामोद्यसागरम् भीताश्च निर्भयाः सन्तु शोकार्ता प्रीतिलाभिनः उद्विग्नाश्च निरुद्वेगाः धृतिमन्तो भवन्तु च आरोग्यं योगिनामस्तु मुच्यन्तां सर्वबन्धनात् दुर्बला बलिनः सन्तु स्निग्धचित्ता परस्परम् मा कश्चित् दुःखितः सत्वो मा पापी मा च रोगिणः मा हीनः परिभूतो वा मा भूत कश्चिश्च दुर्मनाः आकाशस्य स्थितिः यावच्च जगतः स्थितिः तावन् मम स्थितिः भूयात् तावन् मम स्थितिः भूयात् जगद्दुःखानि निघ्नतः जगद्दुःखैकभैषज्यं सर्वसम्पद सुखाकरम् लाभ सत्कार सहितम् लाभ सत्कार सहितम् चिरं तिष्ठन्तु शासनम् चिरं तिष्ठन्तु शासनम्